We begin our report with an indictment to come and an indictment amended. First, to the amendment. Federal prosecutors have filed additional charges against Donald Trump in the classified documents case. The former president now faces one new count of willful retention of national defense information and two new obstruction counts. That case has also gained a third defendant. A maintenance worker at Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate has been added to the case. Now to CBS's reporting about a possible indictment to come. The former president's lawyers met with federal investigators Thursday regarding the separate probe into his actions on January 6th. A source tells CBS News a target letter notifying Trump of the investigation points to three federal statutes, including conspiracy to defraud the United States. CBS News congressional correspondent Scott MacFarlane joins me now. Scott, let's start with the documents case. What do we know about these new amendments to it?
This case just got bigger in several different ways. A third defendant in this case, Carlos De Oliveira. He's a maintenance worker at Mar-a-Lago. He stands now accused, along with Donald Trump and Trump's aide Walt Nauta, with being part of this conspiracy to obstruct justice in the investigation of the alleged mishandling of classified records. And it gets real granular real quick, John. This new superseding indictment in which De Oliveira is named accuses De Oliveira of being part of this effort to, among other things, delete security camera footage from a server at Mar-a-Lago, what the feds would characterize as a destruction of evidence. And in the superseding indictment, it gets real detailed. They say De Oliveira went to another employee at Mar-a-Lago and said, the boss wants the server deleted. According to the superseding indictment, John, the employee told De Oliveira, I can't do that. I don't know how to do that. And De Oliveira repeated and insisted the boss wants the server deleted. There are new charges against Donald Trump, including that episode involving the alleged attempts to delete the security camera video, but also a particular document held at a particular time. In July 2021, we believe this is a reference to that document detailing possible war plans or military plans involving Iran. The case gets bigger with an extra defendant, and the allegations get broader against Donald Trump himself.
Scott, let me go back to this question of deleting the videotape files. As I recall from the original indictment, that's relevant because so much of Walt Nauta's movements and the chain of custody of these documents was tied to specific video footage that had specific timestamps on it, which is why the original indictment was able to be so thoroughly detailed about where these documents went as they went through the journey from bathroom to bedroom to closet in Mar-a-Lago.
The composition of this superseding indictment, the formula you see on the 60 or so pages, is so much about cover-up, about eluding the detection of things, not just the moving of the boxes, but now the allegations of an attempt to delete security camera video. One of those true part and parcel moments in which you believe the prosecutors are alleging it's a cover-up, not just a crime. It's a cover-up of a crime, not just a crime. This just in from the court in Miami. It'll be Carlos De Oliveira's first court appearance Monday, 10:30 a.m. at the federal courthouse in Miami for his first appearance in this case, a case which is on a pathway towards a May 2024 trial date. And John, this is significant. In his court filings tonight, special counsel Jack Smith tells the court and asks the judge not to delay the trial. He says they can keep things on schedule despite the new charges and the new defendant.
CBS News Chief Election and Campaign Correspondent Robert Costa joins us now. Bob, I'll give you a double-barrel question. First, what's your reaction to the additions to the existing federal indictment against former President Trump that Scott and I have just been talking to? And then we'll sashay over to what could be the third indictment of the president, and how is his team and how are he planning to respond to that?
In a bike race, a lot of times you'll spend miles and miles going at a certain pace. Then as the final lap approaches, you'll really start to pick up speed. And what we're seeing here, John, is a special counsel, the Justice Department, picking up speed because timing is of the essence for them. With little more than a year before the 2024 presidential election and any kind of specter of having politics be part of a federal investigation, a federal indictment, and then possibly a federal trial, you can see with their actions in court that this is a government investigation on two fronts: special counsel's on January 6th, the special counsel's investigation of classified records, and they want to move as soon as possible. But it's a fast move. They're trying to land the plane while also fixing the plane, to use another analogy, because they're interviewing witnesses, expanding the probe, all while moving closer to an indictment of Trump.
This document, Scott and I were talking about the Iran document, that there were, in the first indictment, there is an account of the former president, showing classified documentation about a war plan with Iran. You wrote about this and reported about it extensively. Now it appears that was discussed in the first indictment, but it was not a part of the charges. Now it appears to be. Is that right?
That's right. What we're seeing is a special counsel investigation that's picking up new information, almost like how we reporters will pick up different things from different sources. They're picking up different things from different witnesses, and they're hearing about instances where Trump has alleged to have shown these documents. The Iran document in Bedminster, New Jersey, allegedly shown to people out of any kind of proper context, without any kind of classification approval given to people in the room. And so when a federal investigator learns of a possible crime, even if other indictments have already been made, they will add those indictments to the pile.
Scott, on the Hill, this next indictment that may come is related to January 6th. Many of the people that you spend your time with during the day were on the Hill, perhaps, in fact, most of them on January 6th. How are they navigating or reacting to the reports over the last few days that another indictment is headed towards the former president?
John, they're reacting consistently and to a degree predictably. Republicans have continued this argument that they believe the Biden administration, the Justice Department, are weaponizing federal prosecutions and the Justice Department itself to target Donald Trump ahead of 2024. They've been making that argument through the course of this year. They made it earlier this week when they accused the Justice Department of cutting what they call a sweetheart deal with the president's son, Hunter Biden. They made it after the charges were filed in Manhattan. They made it after the charges were filed in Florida. They've made it in anticipation of charges being filed here in Washington. There's no indication the politics inside the Republican conference changed one bit because of this superseding indictment in Florida or this potential indictment in Washington. But I add this caveat, I think it's important. It doesn't mean a January 6th prosecution against the former president doesn't land differently with some number of Americans. There's always been an obscurity to that Manhattan case, a lack of familiarity with the records or the scope of this Florida case. But a lot of people were watching TV between Election Day 2020 and January 6, 2021. They saw what they saw, and a charge for more than just a rioter, a charge for more than just somebody who was unlawfully in the Capitol that day. It might land differently with some people in America, if not inside political circles.
And Bob, a final question to you. Remind us again, one of the things that struck all of us during the January 6 hearings in the House was the kinds of witnesses who were willing to go on the record to discuss what the former president was up to. What's your sense? Remind us of that, and also your sense of how they may have built this case using some of those people from the innermost parts of the president's inner circle.
You saw people from the January 6th committee in the House, like Cassidy Hutchinson, a former top aide to then Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, talk in vivid detail about what they witnessed behind the scenes in the days before and after January 6th, the Capitol attack, what was going on inside the West Wing. But what really matters for this special counsel is what can he and his team build on top of that already existing information in terms of witnesses who might have known people like conservative lawyer John Eastman, who authored what many people call as a blueprint for a coup about how to overturn an election. And so much of the focus, we're told by people close to this investigation, has been on the December period after the Electoral College votes in December 2020. That's where Trump becomes intensely interested in using the January 6th certification marker as an opportunity to essentially stay in power. And he took American democracy to the brink.
Robert Costa and Scott MacFarlane in Washington, thank you very much to both of you.